It's another week and another managerial change in the Premier League. So Chelsea have let go of Graham Potter. And it's one actually I'm quite surprised about. I did think they'd give him the rest of the full season because this was their plan. Originally was to have a project, a long-term vision for Chelsea. They loved what he did at Brighton, but they recognised when they took him on that it was a long-term vision that he had for the club. But as typical in a typical Premier League fashion, that they say all these words and then once the season starts and things aren't going quite to plan, they suddenly pull the trigger and don't accept anymore that there's a long-term plan. And I think that's quite, we've got the similar situation at West Ham, we're having a tough season and everyone wants to change. It's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. But it does present an opportunity, Riley. It presents an opportunity because this is a manager that West Ham, we've known for a while. X has talked about it quite a few times, that the club highly admire in Graham Potter. Is this an opportunity? Do you think West Ham now should act, do what they've got to do, cut ties with David Moyes and look to bring Graham Potter in? What's your thoughts on
it? Well, personally, I think that we should act now, but only because someone else will get there first. I think the best case scenario for me would be to give Moyes to the end of the season, see what he can do. I mean, I do think Moyes will keep up just simply because there's teams around us that are worse. And, I think he knows the squad. I think the squad themselves have the talent and the passion to actually keep us up without Moyes having to do too much. I don't think he's going to relegate us. I think we should be fine with Moyes. And it would just be amicable to have Graham Potter next season, have a fresh start. But with that being said, Leicester have now lost their manager. Chelsea have lost their manager and Spurs have lost their manager as well. And we all know that they're going to act now. I mean, Chelsea must be in the mindset of, Potter, because they're not going to bring in a manager to come in and give them European football at the end of the season. They're just so far off it. I just don't think that's going to happen. But I do think they're sitting there thinking to themselves, well, if we're not going to have him in the summer, we might as well just get rid of him now and just start the search now instead of the summer and everyone's looking for it. So. We've said all season long that there's no point getting rid of Moyes if you can't get a better manager in. Well, here's your chance. Graham Potter, he's a manager for the future. He's young. He's got good ideas. I think he could adapt us into a 3-back system. I don't really think he's sort of come to terms too well with the 4-3-3. So I think he could bring that to West Ham. He's a young, exciting manager. For me, I'd love to have him at West Ham. I just don't think we are going to act. Especially with the winning at Southampton, I just don't see the board sacking him and then bringing in Potter. But then I can see a team like Leicester acting or possibly even Spurs acting before us. So, yeah, it does seem like we're going to lose out on him, to be honest, in my book. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I share that as well. I do share that. That's my feeling of it. I think West Ham, we are typically, we've got an ownership that tends to sit on their hands. They wait and wait and wait. They're not very decisive. They're not quick thinking. They're just, that is not West Ham at all. We've seen it so many times before. But you do raise a really good point there, though, in what you just said. You said that, well, you keep saying West Ham, you want a proven Premier League manager. That's only, there's no one else out there. Who else are going to go for? If we're going to get rid of Moyes now, who would you bring in? Well, now you've got your opportunities. In fact, you've actually got 2 opportunities. Not only have you got Graham Potter, you've got Brendan Rodgers, who I admire both of them. Brendan Rodgers done brilliant at Leicester. I think he's done a really good job. I think he's been a very good manager all of his career, to be honest. Obviously, things haven't quite worked out for him this season for whatever reason. But let's not forget, he's been there for 4 years, I think, at Leicester. They've been challenging at the top end of the table pretty much all of that time. They've won an FA Cup in that period as well. That he's done very, very well there. And if you look at what Leicester said about Rodgers, they really didn't want to pull the trigger. They were desperately hoping he'd turn it around, but just because of the situation they're in, they had to act. They've been decisive and decided to do something. But West Ham, I mean, really, if you look at now the clubs that are left in the bottom end of the table, I do believe now it's only West Ham and Nottingham Forest that have stuck with their managers. I think everyone's made changes. I believe that's the case. And I also read that I think that Steve Cooper's very close to being sacked by Nottingham Forest as well. There was rumours that if he'd lost that game, he was definitely going to go. And don't forget, they only managed to get a draw at the weekend. They could be making changes. So it's a really interesting scenario at West Ham. But I think you're right, Riley. I think knowing from our ownership and how we act, I just imagine that they'll go, well, no, Moyes has just won. That's enough for us for now. Let's see how we get on Wednesday, and then we might see. Do you know what I mean? That's how their kind of mindset works. Rather than going, look, we're already going to make the change this summer. We're already kind of going down that route, because I do believe that's probably going to be the case at the end of the season. I do think, unless Moyes, does win the Europa Conference and things like that. But as far as I'm concerned, you've got a really good opportunity here. You've got a manager that, Chelsea have just appointed him. And don't forget, he's only joined, was it 6 months ago? Chelsea, he's only been there very long. Chelsea are fighting for Premier League honours. They want to win the league. They want to go and compete in the Champions League. They selected Graham Potter as a manager to lead that project. For me, I mean, this is such a good opportunity for West Ham. This is the perfect sort of manager that's available. Young, up and coming, done wonders with Brighton, turned them from a team struggling in the Championship or even League One, whatever it was when he took over, and then brought them up to the Premier League and made them a very, very well-established Premier League side. I just think it would be such a good opportunity, but I'm sadly sharing your vision with this. I think we're going to sit back, wait, and we're just going to watch the others, aren't we? We're going to watch the others do what they're going to do. Rodgers will probably go to Spurs, or maybe Brock Potter might go Spurs, and they're all going to do their merry-go-rounds, and we're just going to sit still and watch, and then go, let's wait until the summer and see what happens. But I actually, it wouldn't surprise me, but I would love West Ham to show some character, some balls, and go, do you know what? We're going to make a change here, but sadly, I don't think it'll happen. What's your feelings on Potter overall, mate? Do you think it was harshly treated at Chelsea?
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I remember doing a video on when Potter got appointed for Chelsea, and I said it's the worst possible thing he could have done for his career. Because when these sort of managers come in and they do a brilliant job with these sort of teams that they're not supposed to do so well in, and then they make that big jump up to the next level, there's just so much demand on them, especially at a club like Chelsea as well. They're so unforgiving. I said the same thing about Nuno Espirito Santo when he moved to Spurs from Wolves, and now he's managing in the Saudi League. I do hope that Potter is quick to get in another managerial job, because it is so easy to just sort of drop off after that. For people to say, well, he's not done well at Chelsea. They've done this, they've done that. He's bought terribly, but I also don't think he's had any control over his transfers. You got Leandro Trossard available and wants to come to Chelsea. You've got Mudryk who wants to go to Arsenal, and Chelsea swoop in and pay through the nose for Mudryk when they should have just bought Leandro Trossard, a player who's worked under Potter before, knows the system. He's a really good, exciting player, and he's done really well for Arsenal as well. So I do feel bad for him, because I don't actually think any of his signings are his buys. I feel like they're Bowley buys. And he's coming to the club in a transitional period. He's not really been able to implement his vision. Like, he used to play like the 5 at the back stuff, and now he's playing like 4 at the back, which obviously he's not very used to. And like I say, I feel like Bowley has a lot of influence and a lot of sticks his nose where it shouldn't be in terms of the football club. So I do feel quite bad for Potter. I think at the very least he should have been given the end of the season, probably another transfer window, to be fair. But if they feel like they can get someone else in, like there's quite a few managers available at the moment, like Nagelsmann, Tuchel, Conte probably will be available for them potentially if that happens. So I see why they did it a little bit, but I just think if you're going to bring in someone like Potter or Thomas Frank or Eddie Howe or one of those sorts of managers, then you kind of need to give them a fair bit of time, and he's not been given that time at Chelsea. So, yeah, I do feel like he's been treated very unfairly, and I do hope that he manages to get in a job very soon, because, same thing with Eddie Howe. He managed Bournemouth. He did brilliant with Bournemouth. He got sacked, and then it took a very long time for him to get another job. And now look at the job he's doing at Newcastle, someone I actually wanted at West Ham in the first place. So, I do hope he gets another managerial appointment soon, but I do think Chelsea have been very harsh on him. But it's just the culture of that club, really, isn't it?
It is. That's how they operate. And like you say, mate, like the thing is with at Brighton, what Potter had, he had control over pretty much the whole football club. He was running, he had a real senior say in everything. Hence why they were just such a well-oiled machine. I mean, he was very much involved in the recruitment side of things, down to the academy, dealing with the first team. He was absolutely had his hands in everything. And hence why it was just their success was down to that. And like you say, when he then went to Chelsea, and I remember you saying this, was that was an error for him, because it's just a different setup. That you're walking into a corporate world where the owners have got a big say in things. They've got departments that run certain things. You just run the first team. Shut up. We don't. You're not involved in any recruitment. You're not involved in this. You're not involved in money. You don't get involved in any of it. You just run the first team, and you could just see it wasn't a good fit. Like, because they did say, as I said earlier, that they wanted this kind of long-term vision. They liked what they'd seen at Brighton, but they just don't allow it. These clubs don't. They're too big to allow that. I think it's because of the vast sums of money that go with Chelsea, the vast amounts of risk, and we've got to get top four, we've got to get to Champions League, we've got to challenge for titles. They're not going to allow one man to have that power anymore. Do you know what I mean? They're not just going to go on then, Graham, we'll just trust you with all that. You just crack on, mate. They'd never allowed it. Whereas I actually think you look at someone like West Ham, we're probably the perfect fit. Like, we've got a bit of money to spend. We're not poor, but we're not a massive team that's got huge amounts of pressure, that's desperate to be challenging and getting the Champions League every year. Realistically, if we could get top half finishes, have a couple of runs in Europe, I think that's palatable for most West Ham fans. They go, yeah, we're up for that. And I think those people like Potter, that fits quite well. He can go to work and make and know there's a bit of a vision. And also, what you did make me think there, Riley, like when you think of how Potter manages and he's sort of saying clubs and, that kind of stuff. You think of how West Ham operate and how they've been with David Moyes. It's kind of the perfect fit because that's what they wanted from Moyes, to say, look, we like him to do the approval. He's the one that signs off and signs. It's nothing to do with us. He tells us. And you do think like this would be would be a perfect fit for a manager. But I do fear that West Ham are just going to sit back here and play the loyalty card on Moyes for a bit longer. And I can just see this being an opportunity missed because... and dare I say, like I mentioned earlier, even maybe with Rodgers, these are two very good managers that are suddenly available looking for work. And West Ham, let's be honest, we should be pretty attractive, despite the fact we're in a relegation battle at the moment. But ultimately, we should be. If you had, leaning away from Potter slightly, then what's your feelings on Rodgers? Is that someone you'd want possibly near the West Ham or West Ham Football Club, or do you think maybe not?
He's not really someone I'd jump at. Like, with Potter, I feel like if he's available, you have to sit down and have that conversation. And I think the strange thing is as well is that if David Moyes lost that game yesterday, he'd be sacked. So for me, it seems strange if that's your mindset. If you win this game, you stay. If you lose this game, you're sacked. Because it's almost like, oh, well, we kind of have to sack you. And it's like, no, if he's not good enough, then you should just sack him anyway. It shouldn't be just based on one singular game where the result is, let's be honest, somewhat out of his control to an extent. You could put the players how you want on the pitch, but it's not always going to work out the way you want. So if you feel like you can sack him after one result or on the basis of one result, then surely you have no confidence in his abilities at all. And he is somebody that you are looking to move on. So for me, someone like Potter comes available, boom, you have to do it. You have to go in there. You have to take that punt, especially on a free. You haven't got to buy him out, nothing. He's literally free. You got to pay the last bit of Moyes' contract. It's a good sign-in. Rodgers for me is more of a punt, I guess. Like, he seems like the kind of manager you bring in to steer in the end of the season as opposed to coming and transferring the football club. But he's done such a good job at Leicester. And I think the only reason he's really faltered this season is because he's lost his best centre-back in Fofana. They're trying to offload Maddison. He's not really been able to spend any of his money. Schmeichel, who was a massive, massive captain and presence in the dressing room, they've not been able to replace him either. He's had no money to spend, really, to implement his vision. And think of the players that he has bought. So I wouldn't be upset by Rodgers at all, but for me, Rodgers is more the kind of person I'd be like, give Moyes to maybe the end of the season, and then if you want Rodgers next, and then assess who's available next season. Will Steele, Michael Carrick, Brendan Rodgers, which of those are the best? Whereas Potter for me is somebody where they becomes available, you just have to say, look, we just have to snap them up. We have to try and get in there early and do it now. I don't see another club having that same urgency with someone like Rodgers. But you never know. I don't see him going somewhere like Spurs, to be honest, especially with Simeone being available next season. Noel has been available now. I just don't really see it, to be honest. But he's a respectable manager, a good manager, and I'd probably rather have him than Moyes at the moment. So
yeah, I'm with you. It's a really interesting scenario as well because obviously we've got our pressures with Moyes, and obviously fans have a lot of unrest and would want to change. And I think there's a lot of doubt amongst, from what X has been telling us on the Patreon, that there's going to be there's certain issues behind the scenes at the club. I don't think they're overly confident in the situation, what's going on. So it does present quite an interesting scenario. And what's really interesting is because all of a sudden now you've got quite a few clubs that are looking for managers. It's really, really a strange one. Obviously, I think it's now what we've got: Tottenham, Leicester, and obviously Chelsea now, all without managers looking. I just think it'd be really naive of West Ham to not even try and approach Potter. I mean, that's what I'd like at least West Ham to do, at least explore the opportunity to speak to him, because he may turn around and say it's absolutely nothing I'm interested in, and he's looking for something else. And if that's the case, fine. But I'd be really disappointed if we just sit back and wait, because typical of West Ham is we'd sit back, do nothing. No, let's give David Moyes the chance. We'd lose to Newcastle, lose to Fulham, and then they'd sack him and then go, oh, he's just taken the Tottenham job. You're like, do you know what I mean? That's kind of what you can imagine happening. But that being said, mate, let's just wait and see. Let's wait and see. We've done this video just on this is quite fresh off the fact that Potter's been dismissed. So let's wait and see what happens. But it's certainly going to be an interesting few weeks for the club.
Yeah, hopefully Potter can come in and wave his magic wand, mate.
Absolutely.